Hey everyone, welcome to an Ellie discussion. I don't know if this is a podcast or a video or all of those things at the same time, but this is a nice little fireside chat we're going to have here with Cindi Meyersohn, who's here with me in Helsinki, Finland, on a beautiful November day. We're going to be talking about data products and stuff, but Cindi, first, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. First, thank you for having me. I know we tried to do this before, so I am grateful to be here. And I don't care if it's gray outside. I love being in Finland, so I really am excited about being here again with you guys. So I run a company called DataRebels. I'm also the COO of Data Vault Alliance. I have been in IT for about 36 years. I started as a network engineer, and I've moved through various channels, if you will, but landed in Data Vault land probably about 7-8 years ago after working with data warehousing and other arenas, if you will. Spent about 17 years in the intelligence community inside the DoD. Before starting my own business. So I absolutely love data. I absolutely love Data Vault, and I absolutely love Ellie. So this is always a fun conversation. We talk about data modeling and things of that nature. So that's a little bit about me.
That's great. And Cindi is a good friend of ours and really good friend of Ellie. The topic of today is kind of not directly data modeling in the end, but rather I was thinking we might take a step kind of back from the intricacies of how to do data on the kind of highly detailed level and consider data things that we do as products. Because now data as a product, that's kind of a big discussion topic and whatnot, and kind of supposedly a new thing that you consider data as a product, and all of the stuff that comes with product design, product development kind of comes with that. So you have the idea of creating products for specific users, so you know who the users are, you do research, figure out the users and their needs, and you create products that fit them. You have your life cycle for the product. The product comes up. It's you design it. You create the product, and eventually it's going away, replaced by something else. You have your product management principles, backlogs, and whatnot. And all of this is kind of now around data. All of this is kind of now supposedly a new discussion topic. Of course, one of the major reasons why people are now discussing this is that data mesh has come. And data mesh has one of its basic principles is data as a product. And overall, I think that's a wonderful thing, because this kind of product thinking is something that we are doing, and we should have been doing this all the time. It's very kind of healthy, I think, for the data industry to start talking about products and product thinking. So with that kind of an introduction, and I do believe we will cover some data modeling aspects as well, and data vault aspects as well, but Cindi, overall, how do you feel about this product thinking discussion now, and are we talking about something new or something that is perhaps just a reminder of things?
Well, I think what's interesting is when you've been in the business, and I am dating myself totally, as long as I've been in the business, and those in my generation who have been in data and in the industry, the IT industry for so long, nothing is new under the sun. And I always get a kick out of some of the, we call them fads, but they're things that have been, and that's not to diminish the work that Samek's done with the data mesh, because I actually applaud her for, raising awareness for things that we've actually known about, if you will, in the industry, best practices, good data management policy, working with our customers, even all the things that we work with on an agile sort of perspective, the whole idea of collaborating with the business, right? And we've sort of, by embracing agile, and I will bring this back to data products, but by embracing agile, along the way, we've sort of gotten to the place in, where agile becomes more, how do we deliver faster, forgetting the fact that collaboration is king inside of Agile, and therefore the business cannot, I will say, abdicate its responsibility to work with IT, and I think that's happened a bit. And so as a result of that, the concept of data products has moved to a certain extent out of the business's hands and into IT to sort of figure out what it is that the business actually wants.
Exactly.
So this concept she has of data products, I think, is timely, but it's something that Agile was supposed to actually sort of step in and enforce to a certain extent through collaborating with the business. So I think bringing the discussion or the focus back to data products is absolutely critical. I'll just say, Data Vault, when we talk about the Data Vault methodology, we talk about specifically that Data Vault has been and always will be about the business and bringing business value. So from that perspective, I think that the awareness that she's raising on data products, I think, is quite well aligned with what we're doing and what we should have been doing all along. Yeah. And I think it's also one of the reasons why losing that focus is why a number of data warehouses have failed over the years. So
yeah, I fully agree, and it's kind of like a reminder that you have to deal with your users. You have to figure out who are the target users for this thing. Who am I creating this for? What are they going to do with that? These are like very basic questions, and I'm a product manager. I deal with these questions in my daily life as the product owner for Ellie.ai product.
Right.
But if we build things that are supposed to be used by someone, analysts and data scientists and whatnot, then of course we should be considering the exact same questions there. That's obvious, but it isn't obvious somehow because we have focused so much on the kind of IT side of things, and we have lost that kind of contact with the users and the consideration of the users.
Yeah. Well, I think it's actually a twofold thing because to a certain extent the business has, when they, in the past, I think maybe not so much anymore because the business is a little more cognizant of what it costs now to actually put in an infrastructure that can handle data and provide the analytics they're looking for. So, it's not so much anymore throwing in the technology as it used to be. We went from data warehouses on, what were supposed to be, data warehouse specific, hardware and infrastructure. And now it's like, we'll throw everything in the data lake because that's going to solve all the problems. And that's a tremendous expense as well. And so now the business is like, wait, we've gone through these digital transformations. We have these modernization efforts going on, and we've invested all this money, and why aren't we getting any more value out? Where we start talking about, data as an asset, and now, the focus is data as a product comes along, right? But the thing that's interesting is, for so long, the business, and I want to put all the blame on them, but I'm going to say this, make this statement, is that the business said, well, give us all the data, and we got into this boiling the ocean kind of scenario where IT's focus, instead of bringing the focus back to the business and asking them, what is it you want? The business sort of said, well, load all the data in and then I'll figure out what I need, which is a very expensive approach. Totally. And, from a Data Vault perspective, one of the things we look at is, we say if the business isn't asking for it, why are we building it? It's very much business focused, which is why we talk about scoping things down. And so data products have always been our focus. It's always use case driven is what we're trying to get to. And so anyway, I think the whole idea of data products along the lines of, use cases and what are you building for your customer is absolutely central to everything we've done in Data Vault. And I love the fact that is coming up again as where should our focus be? That's exactly where it should be. Yeah,
I fully agree. And I think the stepping now kind of away from the mesh discussion towards kind of more generic discussion on how to work with data and data warehouses or whatnot. So, what do you have in a warehouse? You have products in a warehouse. So it's kind of obvious again. It's kind of obvious again that this is how things should be done. I'm kind of thinking about data vault as now a sort of specific approach to things. You said, and this is of course absolutely true, that it's focused primarily on the use case and the business and so on. But considering the aspects of product management now, thinking of life cycle management and ownership questions and backlog and so on that you have usually with products, like I do with Ellie.
Right.
That how does Data Vault, the methodology and the approach, consider those aspects?
So it's kind of interesting. Every product has raw materials. You start somewhere. We like the analogy of, farm to kitchen to table thought. And with data, for one of the things that Data Vault sort of came out of in the early 2000s was sort of the aftermath, if you will, or part of the warning signs for the failures in Enron and WorldCom, where auditability of the data was not being, I would say, enforced as much. And so from a data warehousing perspective, one of the things Data Vault brings is this idea of the auditability of the raw data, so your raw materials, right? So the raw materials come into the vault in the raw vault, and then from there we begin to prepare them, if you will. So that's the idea of getting data into a sparsely built business vault or something where you're starting to apply and I would say combine the ingredients of the data, right, to get an outcome that is specific as a product. And it's interesting because you can look at Data Vault and say, there are some concepts in the business that are pervasive. It's what the business is focused on. And then there are those functional areas in the business where, certain products need to be tweaked for that particular business user, right? And so the idea with Vault is that you always have the raw materials in front of you, if you will, that can be interpreted from the perspective of the customer. And so those data products can be combined with any kind of business rule, if you will, to get an outcome that is of value to the customer that it's targeted to, those kinds of things.
So in the end, what Data Vault does is it gathers these raw materials of these products. It organizes them so that they can be found from the warehouse of things, and then it allows you to produce these kind of customer-focused, customer-facing products, which are ways of utilizing those raw materials to create value for a specific use case, specific group of people. So we're kind of talking about a data product factory, if you'd like, that kind of runs this raw material through this process in a sort of standardized fashion, and then in the end produces slightly different products for slightly different use cases and user groups. Yeah.
Well, if you think about too, like we talk about farms, right? If you're working in a kitchen, of let's say an elite restaurant, right? You have products coming in or raw materials coming in from any given farm, right? And we think about farming the data out of multiple source systems across the enterprise, right? The thing is, each farm has its own environment, right? And none of the farms match, which when we talk about Data Vault, we have to talk about business keys. And we have to talk about integration, what the enterprise has always wanted. And what the kitchen wants is an integrated outcome for a delicious meal, if you will, right? And so to get that meal prepared, they have to, work with the raw materials that they're given to make sure that they integrate into the recipe, if you will, which to me is like, that's a product. That's a product. Part of the integration is also a product, which is something that, unfortunately, for decades, data warehouses have failed to take in data from various source systems in an integrated fashion. Basically, the source systems are siloed, and then they're dropped into the warehouse as siloed, and nothing's integrated. And that kitchen needs to be able to integrate because the meal depends on it. So
I like this. Now we have a sort of very visual mental image of how the data kitchen works.
Yeah.
And I mean, then you have a menu of products, right?
And it is like a factory. The kitchen is like a factory, right?
Yeah. I suppose big kitchens are often run like factories.
Yes.
Inputs come in and outputs go out. But still kind of thinking now from the perspective of product ownership and management and control in that sense also. Now, of course, running the kitchen is one thing, and Data Vault as a methodology and approach has very good guidelines for that, and everything is kind of like documented and clear how that is done. One thing that I occasionally do wonder is the actual meal or the product or an information mart or the data set meant for a specific use case. So I suppose there are many ways of setting that up depending on how the organization runs and whatnot, but how do you govern the end product in Data Vault context?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question because you can't talk about producing different products when there's no governance over I would say no governance over the kitchen or the way the raw materials are actually collected, if you will. So I think data governance is kind of an interesting topic because I think traditionally what's happened is IT has taken on the data governance policy definition and its implementation, which I believe is a kind of a faulty perspective because we have to remember in IT that we don't own the data. The business owns the data. And to a certain extent, I think that because the business is not, quote, technical, they have stepped away from the ownership. They sort of abdicated their ownership over the years and passed it to IT. And so IT has willingly, we understand that, what data is, not necessarily what data means, but what data is. And we've stepped up and we said, we can own that, we can manage all of this, and we do that very well. However, we should not be writing the policy that we then implement. The policies and governance around the data has to come from the owner, and that's got to come from the business. Our job is to implement the policies that are defined for us, and so that means, in my opinion, we have strict policy and governance over data that is central to the way the business operates with regard to compliance and finance and things of that nature. And then there are local, it's kind of like a government, right? You have central government and then you have the local government, right? And I think that is where we see data products coming out that are governed by the local community, if you will, right? So I think governance is going to it's going to be a really hot topic as well, right? And there's a tremendous amount of focus on data governance, and the question is where does the policy come from? It comes from the business, either at the local community level or at the federal, if you want to say federal government level, and then we implement that governance, accordingly. So.
Yeah, I mean, jumping briefly back to the mesh topic, I mean, this is exactly how the governance is also defined there. Again, nothing weird about it. It's just a way of organizing the governance so that the people responsible for different data products and the pipelines and domains and whatnot are coming together to agree on certain principles and standards, which are then enforced. And some of that enforcements and also creation of kind of technical standards and whatnot is also done on the kind of federation level, where the basic principles of how data products are being distributed and whatnot are agreed on. Yeah. So I mean that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, the thing is, again, it's just I think one of the I would say one of the benefits, if you will, of the concept, the theory of what mesh brings to the table is sort of a refocus on the fact that the business needs to take ownership of its data. IT has a place in all of that, which is the implementation of, how the owner wants the data managed and handled. And then, the ability to push some of those decisions down to the local community. And raising the awareness of the importance of data governance. And I go back to the thought of, the agile sort of method of doing things, which is, just enough governance at just the right time, right, against just this set of data, which is, I think, important. All data should be governed, I believe, but I guess the restriction or the level of governance is dependent on the type of data you're working with.
So this isn't this might be a word that I misremember, but in the EU, European Union language, isn't this called the subsidiarity principle, that all the decisions are made as close as possible to the target of that decision?
Well, I don't know that term, but that sounds good to me.
I'm not sure if I remember that correctly either, but it just
it sounds right, though.
I
mean, that is it's the idea of I guess, like you're saying, moving the decision closest to the data and the ownership of the data, which makes sense because who knows the data better, quite frankly.
Exactly. So in the sense of data products and ownership and decisions relating to that ownership, that governance, we could kind of say that there's sort of different levels of governance and ownership in this kind of data vault context, where the whole pipeline and the kitchen or whatnot is kind of centrally governed, and then the individual meals, if you'd like, the products, the user-facing data sets can have a level of governance and ownership there. People who make decisions about the exact contents of that meal. I'd like this to be in here, I like that to be removed. That is a decision best made at the level where that data actually is.
No cheese, please.
Exactly. Yeah, I want this without cheese and this with double cheese.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's not something that the kitchen decides. It's the actual users and their representatives. Yeah.
Well, the thing that's kind of interesting about that, when I go back to my DoD days, right, is that when you're looking at things like data classification, the way you combine data can turn an unclassified data element into a classified data element, because it depends on what it's combined with. And we talk about, I don't want to get off topic, we talk about things like what can be gleaned off the internet, for example, and people will put things out on the internet, and they'll a good intelligence officer can pull pieces out and put an incredible story together and understand in depth your personal profile very, very quickly, and so from a user perspective, if you will, I might have a piece of data sitting out there that doesn't, to me, that has no classification to it. It's, anybody has this. You begin to put those pieces together. Only someone who's close to that type of, I would say, sensitive observation would know that, this data needs to be governed a little bit differently. If we're going to be pulling these pieces together, we need to be very careful about the sensitivity of what we're actually exposing. And at a different level, someone would say that's an unclassified piece of data, right? So bringing the data set and classifying it or governing it at a closer product level, I think is really critical. So I've sort of seen that happen before as well. Yeah, I totally
agree. One thing I kind of want to go back on is also you said that the business kind of now more and more is realizing that they have to take control of the data and understand that data in order to make these decisions, of course. And a friend of mine, hi Sade, if you're listening, uses a kind of metaphor that there's kind of pipelines where you run like drinking water and whatnot. And IT is responsible for building those pipelines and making sure that all the pipes connect in the right places, and you have the kind of setup in which that data, the water, can flow in, and the water or whatever liquid you have there is the responsibility of the business then. And I think one aspect of the perhaps exactly the kind of product discussion coming from the mesh is that the distinction between these two is kind of no longer that clear, that the ownership of a product and the product actually itself, the product is made of both the pipelines and the stuff in those pipelines. So it kind of means that even though, yes, you have your IT experts and data engineers or whatnot taking care of the pipelines, and then you have the data governance or whatnot that has to do with the contents that go in those pipes, there's still kind of an understanding that this is all part of a whole. The product contains both the plumbing and the stuff in those.
It's like a house.
Yeah, it's kind of like exactly.
Like a house, right? What's interesting in that analogy with the water to me is that no matter how many pipes you have running, the source is generally central, right?
True.
And I know that I'm not going to talk about centralized data because in a true data warehouse, data is never centralized. It's always spanned both geographically and any number of ways. So the idea of a monolithic type of data warehouse has never been our vision, I would say, of what a data warehouse is, but there's still always a central source of the data, or the water, right? And you have multiple pipes running that water through. And the idea of a product not just being sort of built or encompassing the data or the information, really, because a product is really information, but having that not just the combination of the data to form the information, but also the pipelines to develop it, makes perfect sense, because you're pulling data from different areas anyway, right? And you're going to combine a different set of pipelines in order to get that result out and develop and produce that product. So
and
makes
again,
sense to me.
Again, using the raw materials to create different sorts of products.
Yep.
You might want to have the water as bottled drinking water somewhere, and I don't know, ice cubes somewhere else. And that's all kind of different ways of using the same contents.
Yeah.
I think this is the key here, that we are talking also about the content of all these different products, and the content is sort of coming through the centralized library, centralized kitchen in the data vault, and governed as a whole, rather than just simply governed at the end as the ice cubes or bottles of water and so on and so forth. Of course, now coming to the topic of data modeling briefly, what data modeling essentially is, it is describing what sort of liquid we have there in the pipes.
Yeah.
So you have the list of ingredients. This is about customers and invoices and whatnot, and then you have some other type of sludge coming through other pipelines, which contains data about products and sales campaigns and whatnot. And documenting and describing that content is what data modeling really does on the higher levels. Then eventually you get down to describing how this particular product is put together, which might be like a logical data model, and eventually a physical data model. You know that this is what the product now exactly looks like. But you still have that higher level understanding of what is it made of, what's the content there.
Yes, when you model properly.
When you model properly, exactly. This doesn't happen if you skip levels of modeling and so on.
Yeah, and the modeling's done from the right perspective. Right?
Exactly.
If it's modeling from the business's perspective, then I think you get the right, I would say, target concepts, developed, if you will.
So you figure out, these are the users that I envision for this product. They are interested in these kinds of things. Now I create the model of these kinds of things, and then that is the design of the data product that I'm going to make.
Yep.
And that describes not only the instructions of how to build that product, which it also does, because of course, especially with Data Vault, we know that from the very well made conceptual model. You have the ontology, you have the taxonomy, you identify the business case, you have a very clear steps how to build the actual thing. But it also acts as simply, description of what the product is. As we've discussed previously, I think, Cindi, we mentioned this kind of two dimensions of lineage, in the sense that we have the actual physical lineage of data coming from here, and then the pipeline goes here, and there's the product. And then we have I think we called it the modeling lineage, that we have the idea that this is the high-level picture of what the business is about here. And then we have the logical model explaining how it's organized for this product, and then we have the physical model saying that, oh no, in this product is now served in this particular technological format.
With one of the things I love about Ellie is its ability to allow the business to articulate right through a visual means, through the conceptual modeling aspects of how it sees its business running, how it sees itself. And those high-level business concepts should also, as you're talking about taxonomies and ontologies, we always talk in Data Vault about building a taxonomy based on concepts, business concepts, and then tying, and let me just step back and say business concepts in the business's terms, right? And so now we're talking to the business in their terms, or they're talking to us in their terms, and they're visually providing those pictures for us of how they see their business running. And then we as IT begin to tie in through an extended taxonomy the system level elements that support the terms that the business is talking about. The logical model you're talking about is then part of tying the business terms to the system elements. The business begins to see where their systems integrate, those integration points which come out on the logical model side of things. And so from a business product standpoint, if we're looking at data products, the business begins to see, oh, my data integrates from these different operational systems. When we serve the data products out, or we make the integrated products or raw materials available then to the product engineers, they're getting a more complete set of raw materials to work from, and they're governed at the appropriate level from the enterprise level, and then further governance can be applied to some of the enriching ingredients that they may have locally, right? So they're producing very specific products that they're governing at their end based on, I would say, I don't want to use the concept of master data, but based on the primary concepts of the overall business. And they're enriching that is what, that's how I think about it.
Oh yeah, I fully agree. I think this is the core of the kind of product thinking idea to me, that we consider these products as something that that is facing the business, and it has to be understandable and useful for the business. That's really the thing. We don't create features into Ellie because we think they are cool. We create features into Ellie because we know someone needs that for whatever purpose. And that is exactly the thing. And how we catch that is by understanding that, okay, business needs information about customers and invoices and whatnot. And what do we get? We get the data model, and then we go on from there. So it's kind of very core of the product thing. And that's why at Ellie we talk so much about data product design nowadays. Because what is data modeling but just a kind of design activity for data products? It kind of makes perfect sense that way. I do think we need to start wrapping this up.
Okay.
But I think this has been an excellent discussion. I really like the fact that this kind of overall, as product manager, this is sort of natural to me to consider this as a good thing to do. But I think also kind of having the idea that the product thinking is really just a part of good data management practices. There's like nothing special here per se, but it's just something that, as you said, we should have been doing all the time.
Nothing
And
new under the
nothing
sun.
new under
No.
the sun. Yeah, and some people have been doing that all the time.
Yeah.
Very good for them. Some of us have kind of, perhaps forgotten about it. But whatever our opinions on mesh itself, I think I'm, all thumbs up for bringing this up again.
Absolutely.
For focusing us on what actually matters. The technology, whatever we do, it's not valuable.
Yeah.
The actual product is valuable. We have to focus on that. The interface between the data work that we do and the actual people in the business who create the money. That's the place where value is created.
Yeah. Well, like we say in Data Vault, if it doesn't bring value to the business, why are we doing it?
Exactly.
And I really genuinely mean, kudos to Zach for reminding us of why we build data warehouses in the first place, and who owns the data, and why governance is so important, and how to properly, I would say, disperse governance so that we aren't choking, we don't have a chokehold on the data necessarily, right? And that it allows our local communities to, actively be engaged in, what we're producing. So
good meals.
Good meals. Yeah. Always good meals.
Yeah, absolutely perfect. Meals, kitchens, factories and products. We've used all kinds of and plumbing and
That's
water
right.
and whatnot. But it's a good way to kind of visualize this thing, because product is a product. My cell phone is a product, as is a data product. Hey, Cindi, thank you for this. This has been an excellent talk. It's been a great pleasure to have you here again. We will hopefully continue discussions later on all kinds of topics. Yeah, certainly so.
Thank you for having me. It's always fun, Juha.
Absolutely so. Thank you for listening in. We'll be back with more content, maybe at some point with Cindi as well.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you.